Hi, thanks for joining me for Life and Times, and my guest today is Mary Marasco. Mary, welcome.
Thank you.
You know,
Glad
what's
to be
really
here.
interesting is that I've known you almost my entire life because you were raised on the
North
End, and I was too. And I always thought you were born in Fernie, and you just told me that you weren't.
Actually, a lot of people are surprised when they say something, how long have you been in Fernie? Or were you born here too? You know, like they ask all the older people. And I say, oh no, I wasn't born here. You know, I came here later. Oh, well, where did you come from? Belgium. And then their face dropped. You mean you're not from here? You know, so it is a question that when I do mention that I wasn't brought up here, they really thought I was the old timer here, born and raised here.
Did you come at the same time with your parents?
Yes. My brother came first, a few months ahead of us, my brother Ben, just to see how it was. My dad, the reason we came is because his sister was living here with her family, and they kept wanting us to come. It was after the war and everything was bad there. They kept saying, come to Canada, you know, it's much better. So he came first, and then we came a few months later. My mom and dad and my sister and I. The four of us came.
Is there just the two of you, you and your sister?
And my brother.
And your brother,
I have an
of
older
course.
brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who was your aunt that lived here?
My aunt is Aniela Waswick, Aniela and Harry Waswick. They were living, well, up North End, up by
Were they the ones that were on 2nd Avenue in the corner?
Right by
Is that
Isabella
what
Dickens.
Mrs. Waswick's first name was?
Yeah.
Aniela?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, I never knew that. All the years I knew her.
Yeah, even Mary and the brothers, Henry and Joe and Stan, when she died and it was her funeral, they put Mrs. Waswick. And I said, well, why didn't you put, well, it was a long time ago and they just, you know, foreign names just weren't in like they were now. And I said, that was such a pretty name.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so it wasn't really well known.
So you are cousin with all of the Waswicks.
That's the only family that I personally have in Fernie.
All these years I've known you, never knew that.
I know. Until I married Jack Marasco, and then I think I'm a relative to half of Fernie. Through Jack.
Of course.
Because it was a big family and...
And was he Italian?
Yes, he was. Yeah.
He had a sister. Was there more than a sister?
There were 9 in the family.
There was 9?
In his family, yes.
And they were from
No, Fernie.
They were from Fernie?
They lived right across Trinity Lodge in one of those small houses. I don't know if you remember where at Sangella used to live. It was right next door, and Raymond Buchanan.
Yeah.
Yes, it was in that. There. They lived there. The family, all 9 of them. I'm not quite sure. The father came from Nordag because they all came from Italy. As young kids, and then they worked in the mines, and they moved to Fernie. And
so was Assunta Marasco not the one that? The more recent one, but the one that was related to the Wills, part of that family?
No, Assunta, Jack's mom, was a Rota.
Oh, okay.
And she came to Fernie because her sister, now I forgot her name, Margarita, I think it is, I'm not positive, was married to Pinotti, the Eugene Pinotti, the old fellow that had the factory.
Oh, yeah.
There. So they were sisters. So we were related to Pinottis through that. And Rotas, because both ladies were Rotas. And that was a huge, huge family. But most of them lived in Creston, the Rotas.
Now there are Rotas here in Fernie,
yes,
right?
And they
are related?
Yes, I believe they're about 3rd or 4th cousins,
okay.
You know, like way down the line.
It's amazing to hear
the
relationship between,
it is.
When you've known somebody for a long time and yet you don't realize the relationships that they have.
It is there, yes, yeah. But like I say, through blood and through marriage, Marascos like myself and family are related to a lot. You know, we have to watch what we say because, oh gosh, we never know. You're a distant cousin. Oh, okay.
Oh, you don't want to offend anybody.
No, definitely not.
What year would that have been when your family came
We
here?
came to Canada in 1952.
1952.
Yes, and they put us in school in grade 8. It was grade 8 then. And oh gosh, it was a nightmare because we didn't know a word of English.
Of course.
None of us. And it was just a case of trying to, and I thank Miss Moyer, which was really good. She was my French teacher. I took French just so I would learn English. I know it sounds, and she was really good. She helped us. And she also had a night school for the immigrants that came.
Ah.
And so my dad and I, my sister and my brother, we all went. Mom didn't go because in those days, mothers
Right.
didn't really, I shouldn't say belong, but they were housebound. But no, that's when we came, and we lived on by the highway on 1-bedroom house for 5 of us. So it wasn't the best, accommodation. So then we built a house right across the police station, and that's in 1955.
That's where I remember
That's
you.
where you, yeah.
So
Yes.
grade 8 and jumping right into
I know.
not understanding
And not
the
understanding
language.
anything. And Miss Dickin, not Isabella, but her sister Dorothy, she was my English teacher, and she was great. She would try.
She was
even
very
though-
soft,
very
gentle
soft
lady.
and very good. They all tried very hard to explain,
How long did it take you to learn and to
Well,
understand?
it didn't take us that long because what we all did at home, which now I regret in one way, is we didn't speak French or Polish, at home. We decided we would try and speak, between my brother and my sister now, try to speak English so we would learn it that much faster. But between the 3 languages, 'cause my parents came from Poland, and then before the war, my brother and my sister were born in Poland, and when Hitler started to take over Poland, a lot of the Polish people went to Belgium.
Oh,
So
so
there
that's
was-
how you ended up
And
in
that's
Belgium.
how we ended up in Belgium, and a few years later, I was born, in Belgium. But, so we spoke Polish at home,
Uh-huh.
and then they all tried French because they were in a French part of
Right,
Belgium.
in Belgium.
And so it was kind of hard. So then when we came to Canada, well, to us it wasn't the kids because we spoke French in school and whatever, and Polish at home, and all the neighbors, most of the neighbors were Polish, or some of them were Italian descendants that also migrated to Belgium. But when we got to Canada, and there were the 3 languages, because my parents still spoke Polish, we still spoke French, and then we were trying English. So it was some words that are not Polish, they're not English,
I know
they're not French.
you end up
We
making
ended
your
up
own language.
yes.
I understand that
So,
fully.
but that's how it worked. And my dad, because he worked in the mine, he learned, more English. And Mom tried very hard. She was very bright too. So, and she worked too at the hotel, at the King Edward Hotel.
Oh, she did.
So,
did
we
my
all-
mother.
Well, oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we all had to when we came here because we were not given passage or anything.
Nobody
nobody
gave
in those
immigrants of that day any
Nothing.
assistance.
No,
Nothing.
no.
Yeah.
The only way we got here is my aunt and uncle paid for the passage to start with, and then we repaid them. But we were sponsored, and that was the only way that we could get to Canada, is if somebody else in Canada, relative if not,
Yeah.
was able to sponsor you.
Exactly. So do you think it took you maybe 6 months to understand immersed in school?
It did, and the only part that was really hard was reading. Because the words were very that TH, just that sound. We didn't have that sound in French. So it was ta instead of the. That part was hard, and reading was hard, and understanding, because French and English, you speak it backwards sort of, so I shouldn't say backwards, but differently. So it didn't take that long, but reading, that was one hard thing to do in public.
It's been 15 minutes? No, because I was going to say maybe we should close the door. So we were talking that you started school in grade 8, and I was wondering how long it took you to understand, because you were immersed in school, and when you're immersed, then at least, you hear all the all the sounds, and you tend to learn better than, say,
Mhm.
if you had been at home. So do you think it took you 5 or 6 months?
Yes, definitely that long, and that was in the 50s. I came 52, so between 52 and 57, we did well,
Mhm.
but it took, I'd say, 6 months to a year to fully
Mhm.
understand. And actually, I would say even to this day, I look up in a dictionary, I hear a word or I see a word, and I think, I wonder what that means. Because it's bothering me because I don't know it.
Mm.
So even after all these years, after 50 and so years, there are still English words that I have no clue what they mean.
Hey, I think a lot of
And
us are
it's-
like that, Mary. Do you still speak the French?
Unfortunately, I can understand part of it, but because we dropped it
Yeah.
at home, we don't. We spoke Polish at home because Mom and Dad
So
did.
are you fluent in the Polish?
Not anymore. We
Because
were
every
in.
language, if you don't use it, you lose it.
That's right. This is what it is. Because
Mhm.
my dad died in 1989, and up until then, we were, speaking Polish at home. We didn't really speak English
Mhm.
between us, so we always did, so they would understand, half and half sort of thing. And then after he passed away, we still spoke Polish with Mom until, well, she died in 2001. So after that, it went, so now I'll hear some words or I'll see some words. I recognize them, but I have no clue what they mean.
And I understand exactly what you're saying, because since my parents have both passed on,
Yes.
the only person I will talk the dialect, I'm fluent in the Italian dialect, is with my stepmother. But the real Italian, honestly, you lose it if you don't listen, if you're not speaking it. So I have the Italian channel, and sometimes I'll turn it on,
Yes.
and there are words I do not, it's like a foreign language.
I know.
And it's
That-
kind of sad, because
It really is.
you know,
Yeah.
knowing a different language and you knowing 3
I
really
know,
expands
it
your
just-
mind and
I
your
know.
thinking.
And now, like I say, I wished the three of us had not decided to drop the French, because, but mind you, at the time, there wasn't a single person in Fernie that spoke French. So it's not as if it
Yeah.
did that any good. And this is talking about, in the mid-50s,
Mm-hmm.
and then my brother went away to the coast, so that just made my sister and I. And after we graduated, I stayed in 57. I stayed for a year and worked at the telephone office, like the old number,
did you?
please. Yes.
In 1957?
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah.
and how long were you there?
I was there from about 55 to 57, 58, because I worked after school.
So was Lillian still?
Lillian Wilson was still
Lillian
chief.
Wilson was, yeah, she
Still
was the
chief.
and
Gwen Brewer and
yeah, who else was there?
Dodie.
Shirley Brown was
Shirley
still
Brown
there?
was still there. I was looking at pictures. I didn't bring them, but I was looking at her in the truck. I was looking at pictures, and there's Shirley Brown and Dodie Commons and Gwen Brewer
And also
Dorothy White.
oh my goodness, Irma Cree.
Irma, yes.
Doreen Kupcha.
Yes, Doreen. Yes, her
Yeah.
picture was in there too.
Mhm.
And
Because
I'm
they were
thinking,
some of the original people.
Yes.
When I went to work there, while I was in school, and it would have been 62, 63, 64, I worked there nights and weekends. And
Okay, so
I
that
did-
was I was.
Yeah, you were
I was
gone
ahead.
already.
I was.
But
yes.
some of those ladies were still there.
Oh yes. Yeah. It was
and
a long time.
Mrs. Wilson was still there.
Yes, we used to call her Chiefy. She liked that. She
Yeah?
thought that was really.
I loved that work.
Oh, me too.
It was fun.
It was interesting, and it was
You
fun.
know what was really fun was after about a year, the older girls said to me, "You know, Mary, all you have to do is click this button this way and you can listen in." What? I can hear without. And they said yes. So whenever Nick, 'cause by that time I was going out with Nick, anytime I heard him making phone calls, then I would click to see who he was talking to.
Well, we knew whoever he was calling.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way. And the party lines were a killer.
they were.
Like we had 2 rings for M and
Yeah.
1 ring or 1 pull for N
And
or
do
whatever.
you recall that the board was,
Oh, it
just
was
a bunch
huge.
of holes, right?
Yes, and we plugged it in.
And each one that you plugged in had like 5 numbers on
Yes.
it. And I remember mine at home was like 423L1, 423L2, 3,
Yes.
4. And so you had to know exactly,
Exactly.
how to put in
That's
that
what I mean.
tip to know
Yes.
to ring
To ring,
the 1
and then
or
you
the
had
2
the,
or the
we
3.
had the little button for M. We had 1, 2, 3 for M, and 1 for L,
Yeah.
or whatever. Oh, it was great. Like,
Yeah, it was.
by the time my mom and dad got the phone, my dad was totally against phones, so we didn't have one for a while. So there were only 2 of us that were on the line, so that was good. But Jack's line, which was on Fifth Avenue, and we all lived on Fifth Avenue, it was everybody. So we had Mrs. Penny, Mrs. Kemick, and if you remember Wilf's mom,
Mhm.
Mrs. Kemick,
Yeah, I remember her
she
well.
loved being on the phone and just never stopped. So you couldn't hardly get on that line because it was all the one, and there were about 5 or 6 of them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they all, once Mrs. Penny and Mrs. Kemick and all of them got on the line, well, you might as well forget it. And I remember a couple of times as an operator, I had to cut in and say, I'm sorry, there's an emergency, or whatever they needed, because
Mhm.
somebody had to go to the hospital. Well, you knew everything.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
exactly.
The police called you,
Mhm.
you talked to them all the time. That's how we kept awake during the night,
Yeah.
was we talked to the police. They would.
I
there was
never had
only
a
one-
night shift, thank God.
Oh, you're lucky.
I was
That
scared
was-
to death of being alone on a night
Oh,
shift.
in that little room.
Yeah.
Oh, I know. No,
So
I
I
loved
never
every
had night
door.
shift. I only worked till I think it was 11.
Oh, well, I had the 11 to 7, whatever it was. That was.
At that time when I started, Irma had wanted a steady night shift. So she worked, she and Doreen were the ones that did
A lot
steady
of-
nights.
oh, okay.
So I was so happy.
I know. Isn't that great to have somebody?
Yeah.
Yes, you
Yeah.
take it.
You know what was really funny too was that we had all the phone booths, right? The standing phone booths around
Yes.
town, and often people, men, who were lonely, would pick up the phone and they'd say, "Can you talk?" So if we were, he didn't know, we didn't know
Yeah,
who it
who it
was.
was.
But it was just somebody who was lonely, and if
Yeah.
we were not busy, then we'd say, "Okay." And lots of lonely men who used to want to
Oh,
talk to the
yeah.
operators. Did you have that?
Not really. Yeah, no. Oh, darn, I missed that.
Oh, I know.
No, I wasn't a counselor. No, we just had the regular, like I say, the police or anybody else that needed, Washington
Mhm.
needed, but during the night, and there was nobody around.
Well, in the middle of the night
the middle of the
especially,
night,
you wouldn't have
yes.
had people. But this was in the evening lots of
Oh,
times,
yeah.
yeah.
Wow,
That was a really neat job.
I like that.
it
I
really
had
was.
that job, and soon as we came to Canada, or I think it was about we came 52. So about 53, first I was doing, in 53, I was cleaning house for Mitchell's, the lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
That's the house that Sombrowski lives in now. Oh, at my end, at Park Avenue, Park
Oh.
Crescent, that big house.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's where the lawyers worked, and I got to know them because my sister worked after school part-time in the lawyer's office,
Ah.
as filing clerk
Mhm.
and whatever. And Elizabeth Batchlett, and Batchlets were terrific, to us. They
Mhm.
lived just a block away down by the highway. And Elizabeth worked there, and she was doing something else, so she asked me if I wanted to clean the house. So that's where I was, and they were terrific. They just treated me like gold. They wanted to put me through school and everything as a young girl, but I really didn't really want to go to university. I didn't want to be a teacher or a nurse. And at that time, that was mainly what you went for.
Oh, yeah, for the woman, yeah.
For the one thing
Yeah,
or the
teacher
other.
or nurse, it
Teacher
seemed
or
like
nurse.
was the
And-
thing, or working in a bank or an
Yes.
office.
So
That
I
was it.
didn't, so that I did that, and then I worked for Yips, Charlie and Mrs. Yip,
In the,
in a Diamond Grill.
oh, no kidding.
I also
So
worked
the
there.
Diamond Grill was open in the early 50s,
Oh,
late
yeah.
40s?
And in the 50s.
In the
Well, I don't know
50s.
about the 40s.
Okay.
Oh yes, I worked there until about 56. So I worked there for about 3 years after school.
That
My
was my
sister and I.
first job, 15 years old. I went to Mrs. Yip and said I would like a job, and she said okay. So I would work Friday and Saturdays. This was before my telephone office
Yes,
job.
me too.
Yeah. So I was there for maybe 3-4 months, and it was a Sunday afternoon. I remember it clearly as if it was yesterday. And do you remember that counter that when you walked in, there was a counter?
Yes.
Where people
there
used
where
to
people
sit,
used to
and
sit,
then there were
yeah.
the booths, and they
And
had
the
the little
booths on
mini
this side.
jukebox and the
Yes,
big jukebox.
yes, or the big jukebox
Yeah.
right on the right, yeah.
And so there was this wonderful man called Swede, a tall Swedish person, I guess, who was a lovely man. Anyway, he was sitting at the counter, and there was a couple of others, and I was feeling really good because Swede had just finished, and he had left me a 50-cent tip, which
that
was
was lots.
a ton of money back in
Yes.
in the 60s.
Oh,
50-cent tip. Anyway, my dad walks in, and he looks around, and he comes up to me. I'm behind the counter, and he goes, "There's men here." And I said, "Yeah, Dad, it's a restaurant." And he goes, "You're coming home right now." And he made me quit. Right then and there.
Seriously?
Yes, because my dad had these old-fashioned Italian ideas, and I don't know what he thought restaurants were.
Oh my goodness.
Mrs. Yip was so kind, so wonderful. She goes,
She was.
you know, she understood
Yes.
ethnic people,
Not a
and she
bad
said,
one.
"Mary, that's okay. You can leave." And so that was my first job.
Oh. Well, actually, mine, other than cleaning house at Miss Mitchell's, it was at the grill. I was about 14, you know, in the 50s and middle 50s, and I thought, oh, I couldn't. So my sister and I both worked there. Well, we all had to because there was no way we could make ends meet. My dad got a job at the mine in Coal Creek, and Mom got a job at the hotel, but it was still.
Yeah.
And then we were trying to build a house because we tried to get out of this one bit, which we were renting, you know, wasn't ours. And so it was, you know, but Mr. and Mrs. Yip were terrific.
I was just
And
going
the
to say that.
food.
Wonderful. Yeah. Remember
They're-
those pies? That
the
one of the brothers, was it Mrs. Yip's brother or
Yes.
Charlie's brother?
I think it was Charlie's because
Yeah.
he was a Yip.
Yes. And do you remember those Boston cream
Oh,
pies?
I was just going to say I couldn't think of the
Lemon
name.
pie.
And
That's
the
the
lemon
first
pies.
time I saw
Me too.
such pies.
That high.
Yeah.
And you did, oh, and it was good, and it wasn't just the meringue.
No,
had
it
stuff.
was delicious.
But their food, I can honestly say to this date, I have not tasted
yeah.
other places I've gone the way theirs was.
Everything from scratch, and
Yes.
we would make. She would make lunches. So I learned how to make lunches for the guys. Some of the guys that were working single men.
Yes.
Beautiful lunches for like $2. I don't know how they ever made any money back in the day.
I must tell you this thing. This is in the 60s after I was married and I was working at Crow's Nest. So I would say about 62, whatever, 63. We always, at Crow's Nest, we didn't leave our desk. We had coffee downstairs. All the girls went except for one, and we'd all go down. And there were a few of us. And we would be hungry. I don't know why, because we started at 8. But what we did quite a few times is we'd phone the Diamond Grill, even though they didn't have lunch at 10 o'clock. And they would make us, Mrs. Yip would make us Chinese food, deliver it, or I don't know if they delivered or we went and got it. And we'd have that 10 in the morning because we were starving and we all craved it and we all loved it.
So when you say the Crow's Nest, are you talking about the Crow's Nest company office, which is now City Hall?
Yeah, that's where I worked. That was my first major job.
So what was it like in that building when you started working?
Well, it was great in there. Like I say, I started working there in '59 after I came back from Calgary when I went to college there, and I got the job there. I was going to stay in Calgary, but there was an opening, and I can't remember who I knew. Probably Mr. Mitchell, because he was still there, the lawyer, and so he mentioned. So I got the job there as a junior girl. But it was terrific. That company was a family company. We were all there, like Norman Crossfield, Ken Whitelaw, Dick Furno, Bill Thompson, like all of them. And Mr. Urt was the president at the time. Mr. Prentice was.
Was Mr. Wilson there?
He was, but he was in Sparwood because we
Oh.
had. That's when they still had the sawmill.
Okay.
So Bill Wilson was in Sparwood, but and Jim Morris was in Sparwood because he was the superintendent of mines, and Jack Crabb, he was a geologist, so he was in his office. Lou Dworkin, Jack John. I'm going back with all these.
I know,
names.
those are great names.
And the only way I remember them
Mhm.
is once I was there for about a year, I worked for all of them.
Let's take a little break.
Okay. Can we?
So we're talking about your years working at the Crow's Nest Pass Coal Company, which is the building that is now
That
City
is
Hall.
And I remember when I first went into that building, I worked downstairs first, and everybody was downstairs.
Like downstairs?
No, not downstairs,
Oh.
downstairs, on the main floor.
On the main floor,
Sorry,
okay.
the main floor. And the engineers were all upstairs, so and the girls were downstairs. Or downstairs, I shouldn't say that, the main floor.
Mhm.
But it was great. There was, before they remodeled, I guess prior to my time in the 30s, 40s, whenever it was, they had living quarters up there.
Oh, really?
They did, and there was still chimneys and dressers and everything that were built in the wall. It was great, and then it was all covered, you know, later on. But you could tell the upstairs had people, they had been living in there, and there was living rooms, and it was very interesting.
Yeah, sure. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, they did.
That's
And
really
the office that you were in,
Mhm.
the corner one, that was my office. The corner one,
Mhm.
and it was bathroom, and then it was Jim Morris. By then, he was back in Fernie as, like I say, superintendent of mines. And then it was Jack Crabb, Jack John, all the engineers. And then it was a huge engineering room where Lou Dworkin was the head of the engineering at that time.
Which is
And-
Chambers now.
I'm not too
Yeah.
sure. I haven't really been up
Yeah,
there except
yeah.
the one time.
Yeah, it's Chambers. I knew that was the
That was
engineering room.
Yes, it was big, and then we had Walter. His last name, the safety man for the mine. So they were all located.
Did they
in
still
Fernie.
have the stairwell that was all wood when you were working there?
Oh yes,
Because it was a beautiful, beautiful wood
It
that
was.
went up,
It was
and
everything.
beautiful paneling on the walls.
Yes, the paneling upstairs was terrific, and even downstairs. Before they remodeled and covered everything, I'm trying to think what it looked like, and unfortunately, we just didn't take pictures. You know
Mhm.
that many pictures, but it was totally a different building
Yeah,
than
was,
it is now.
Yeah, it was very,
It,
very
homey,
elegant.
and very
Yeah.
elegant and homey
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And
And all that
downstairs, like I
beautiful
say,
wood.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
That stairway and that when you walked up, it was great, wide,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that was really nice.
I
Yes.
remember going in there once when I was a little girl for some reason or another, and it just impressed me.
Oh,
The big, beautiful wood stairwell.
yes, it
Mhm.
was. Yes, that's.
So how long did you work there?
I worked, started 59, and the only reason I left, when Kaiser purchased Crow's Nest, and that was in 60, well, they came, the Kaiser people came and had an office in this building, in a Crow's Nest building, for about a year.
Oh, did they?
And they were doing work from there, and I was actually doing their work because I worked for all the guys at that time, which was great, upstairs, and they started in actually 66 or 67, and so they offered me a job with them, and it was great. I was going to be senior secretary and be in charge, so that was terrific. The only downfall was I had to be in Sparwood
Mm.
or Elk Valley. So, but I did go because we had the bus, we had the
Mhm.
travel, and so that's when I actually left. But like I say, Jim Morris was also transferred.
So was that about the same time then that Shell took over?
Shell was before that.
Oh,
They-
it had
they
to
took-
be after because Shell is the one that gave the city the building for $2.
Oh yeah, right. Because it was still Crow's Nest, that's right, I'm sorry, I got my dates mixed up. So 67 is when Kaiser took over, and then we had different people working here, because most of the mine people were all transferred to Sparwood.
Yeah, because they built that big, huge building in Sparwood.
No, actually, that was, well,
That was after?
but that was after me.
Oh.
We were in trailers.
Oh.
And oh gosh, it wasn't the best of, office thing. They did have, actually, I should say, before that, Kaiser had an office on top of MC Cash Groceries.
Oh, did they?
They had a couple of huge rooms there. We worked out of there for a while. I remember working out of there until they got the trailers. This is in 67, 68, and they had the office upstairs of the grocery store. And then they actually got all the trailers in, and everybody was transferred over into, well, I should say Sparwood. It was more into the valley, yes.
And that's really interesting to me because, I was busy back in those days with, like in 67, I had married and I was busy with my children, so didn't pay too much attention to all of
I
this.
know, that's the
So this is really, really interesting to me.
So in the 60s, I got married in 61, but we didn't have children. So that's why I was so involved with
you were
work.
able to go
And I was
work.
able to travel there and wherever. But so that's when I went, and then when Kaiser took over, like I say, we went up there, and Jack also went there because I'm trying to think. Oh, he was working at the sawmill. So then they were building all these roads and all these buildings, and so he was on roads, building the roads, and also keeping track of those huge towers that they have there. They're not called towers, but those, I forget the name now. So it was, we were both going, to Sparwood, so.
It made a real difference in Fernie when Kaiser took over. What do you remember about those times and the changes?
Okay, the one good thing when Kaiser took over was that the first thing when they did negotiations, it was for a 5-year contract. And that was so good because a few years prior to that, in the early 60s, it was up and down. The mine would work 5 days one week, 1 day the next, and you never knew. People didn't move because they had nowhere else to go. They were miners, and so they stayed here. And the cost of living wasn't that bad. They were able to live in Fernie at that time. And so when Kaiser took over, it was great. Like I say, that was great. They helped the town, and everything was fine. And the housing, like they built Richmond, but very affordable, so it was just a case of people were back to normal, middle class was back to middle class, not down lower. What I noticed after that, and then of course I left and had the children, the major thing that is really upsetting now is when the ski hill took over. I remember when they first started, I was still working at the coal company, Jack Crabb and Jim Morris and Heiko and Bill Prentice, all of them, they started it. It was fine. It was fine when Heiko had it. It was a family thing.
Yeah.
But once it went public, it went downhill because people I shouldn't say downhill, for the people that lived in Fernie.
Yeah.
The people that myself that did not.
Well, it changed everything.
It changed totally. The main thing that I'm upset about, and a lot of people are, was the cost of living. The housing. You cannot afford to live in Fernie. Everything went up so sky high, and you noticed it. Our wages didn't go up, the way things went up. And so Kaiser was fine. Ski Hill was fine until when Heiko had it, but once it was taken over by
Charlie Law.
Yes,
Yeah.
it just went. A lot of international people came, a lot of other people came that unfortunately for us had the money, bought out all the houses that they could, and everything else went sky high. There we noticed the groceries, the just the cost of living, altogether. And so that's the one thing I really have against it. Nothing against the ski hill, but it's just not the same.
Well, it definitely changed the town.
It did.
Yeah.
It totally changed the town. A lot of older people, mind you, a lot of them have passed away, the ones that from that era. But a lot of them left town because they cannot afford to live here. I, for one, wouldn't mind going somewhere else because it's from pension money to pension money, from payday to payday sort of thing. But God help us if something bad happens that I have to replace, because you cannot afford the people coming in to check it or the people, fixing things. It's impossible in Fernie.
It really is. It's that part of it is difficult for sure.
It is very difficult.
What do you think is positive out of that?
I'm really trying to say there is, but I can't find anything positive. We have beautiful houses here now, and that, but I don't know. I guess the tourism is, but I'm not really towards that. It's the skiing and the biking, So if you belong to any one of those two, it's great. But if you don't, and like I say, it's great for the middle age. But once you get older and you have aches and pains and you cannot do all those things, I don't know. We do have, it's a better choice of stores than that. I will say we got two major stores, grocery stores, and that's
the fast
good.
food places
and
are nice.
And the fast food places are nice, yes. Some of the other places, well, if you go once a year, it can afford it, But it's good to have those things. Unfortunately, they didn't keep the prices down for the cost of living. I love to have all the places to go to separately in that, and to the stores. You don't have to rush to Cranbrook or somewhere else for anything. We have Canadian Tires, we have Home Hardware, we have Independence and Save On. So we have mainly most of the things, and we do have some clothing stores in that downtown, and specialty stores for those
which
that
are nice. They're lovely
they're
to
nice
have.
for people. I know my daughter comes in and she goes to all of them and has a look, so that is great. But it's too bad that it wrecked it for the affordability of living in Fernie. That's the only thing that I find
just
bad. Just because they can afford it.
Yeah.
Other people come as tourists. And we do that when we go somewhere else. We want to look at those places. Oh, we'll buy that souvenir or that souvenir. But when you live in a small town like this, and taxes keep going up, and the other thing, maybe I shouldn't bring it up, but the way that the city councillors and the mayor are thinking about big buildings, new buildings, please try to repair. Try to figure out whether things can be fixed or not, rather than going to millions and millions that we taxpayers have to do.
It's a different attitude today. While I was there for 16 years, the groups that I worked with, most of them, were very aware of the fact that Fernie in 1931 had gone into receivership.
Yes.
And then again, and we were without a council until 1945. And also in the 90s, Fernie was close to bankruptcy.
Many
so
times,
we
yes.
worked really hard for almost 30 years to build up reserves,
that
to
was
pay
great.
debts, build up
Yes.
reserves, and we only had less than $1 million of debt when I left in 2018. So yes, there's money there, but it took 3 decades
That's
nearly
right.
to build it up. So now this group feels like they've got money and so they can spend it.
Yes.
I just don't know how they're going to replenish it unless taxes go sky high.
Well, that's the people now that are in council and the mayor first, they're not thinking at all about the people that are living in Fernie. All they're seeing is, oh, we were there when they built that thing. And anything else, like we do need a community center. It could be upgraded or that one gone. The arena can be upgraded, but we do not need to spend millions and millions of dollars for somebody to ride their bikes or go around in buildings, and just, that is not, we need it for roads. That's the one main thing.
Yeah, let's just take one tiny break. I really like, we were talking about the high cost of living in Fernie and the changes, and that came about because Fernie is a resort.
Yes.
And that's been wonderful in one respect, as we mentioned, with the buildings and the amenities that we have, but with it came the high taxation and the high prices.
Yes.
That make it very difficult for people who aren't making huge wages. And even people that are making large wages, say at Tech, have a difficulty buying the houses that they're building now that are, you know, for instance, they just finished building some houses down in West Fernie, some duplexes, and I believe they start at $548,000. Now, even $548,000, I don't know how much you have to be making to afford that.
Definitely,
mortgage.
There has to be two people working, you know, for sure, at high wages. You cannot just be a clerk or whatever. You have to be high wages, and you can't afford anything else. So it seems like now in Fernie, you're working just to have a house. Young people cannot come in, or other people just cannot come in and just buy, because that's all they would do. They wouldn't be able to do anything else. And with the taxes, you know, it keeps going up and up. And one thing that I don't particularly like is the council and the mayors and the staff there, that they insist on having all these new buildings and spending the money that we really don't have here. You know, it should be looked at. I know there are probably some that were allotted for some things, but unfortunately, we're spending too much all at once. You know, we shouldn't be taking from other reserves, you know, that they're trying to do, or borrow to put us deeper in debt. You know, so what is...
So when I started, I was voted in, I think it was 2001 November, so really it was 2002 when, you know, I really started. And I remember hearing that we were hanging on by our fingernails. This was the term that they were all using it.
Yes.
Because we were in a bit of a financial downturn. And that was because in 1931 to 1945, Fernie was in receivership. The provincial government had designated somebody to run the city. And then in 1945, finally, when the city of Fernie was doing better, there was another elected council. So between those years, there was no elected council. It was run by a designated person by the government.
Goodness, I didn't know
and that is in the, you know, that is...
It's going back.
It's in the history, and it's documented, so I'm not making it up.
Yes, oh good.
And then in the 90s, Fernie got into another bind again. I don't know if you recall that council that was completely wiped out, and staff was let go, and there was talk
I
about,
vaguely remember now that you're bringing it up. Yes.
So then, of course, after that, councils decided that they needed to put money away. And how would they do that? They would do that by building reserves. And so I recall when I first came on, there was a couple of us that said, let's start with a road reserve. Actually, I think it was Dan Skimming, and I said, I believe in that, and I supported that. So we started with a road reserve, and then it ended up being that there was reserves for water, for all of the things that are needed to run the city.
Yes.
So each year, we on the budget, which is so funny because the budget is the most important thing that a council does, and yet nobody ever shows up for budget meetings or open to the public. We ask people to come, nobody shows up. Maybe one person.
Yes.
But anyway, we built it into the budget that we had to save money and we had to pay off any debts, because there was a debt from 2004 when the city redid the Main Street, those 3 blocks on Main Street.
Yes.
So here we are. 16 years later, because I was on council for 16 years, we owed almost $1 million that was left over from the downtown revitalization. And we had, I believe, almost more than $11 million in reserves.
Oh, wow.
Now, people can say, well, you didn't spend as much money as you could have remodeling some of the buildings, but you couldn't really do both. The maintenance that was needed to be done was done, but no new buildings.
Right.
Because you wanted to build up this money. And plus, the provincial government mandates that every local government community has to have a certain amount of money so that in case something were to happen, you could run the city for a whole entire year without it being, a hardship on the people. And so this is where we were when I was voted out. And I was voted out because a lot of people put me down for being not wanting to spend money. Like one young person said to me, you had borrowing power, you had money, you could have borrowed, you could have done so much with the money. However, you need to think about the history. So maybe it's my age, or maybe it's my upbringing, because, I worry about things and I believe in taking care of all of the people in the town, and I believe in keeping the town as active and as well as possible, that I didn't want to get the city of Fernie into debt.
That I can, it's only common sense though, to not to just because you've got that extra dollar, hey, let's buy this or let's build that in this case. Let's do this and let's do it. You don't. I mean, you can see it now. You say they had some money for roads. Why on earth didn't they use it properly? Why didn't they build from sidewalk to sidewalk? I mean, the roads that they are building now, they might as well leave them alone. They were much better shape than they are now. There's no room. Well, I call them a one-way Fernie, one-way street Fernie now.
The changes came about because staff considered new ways of doing roads. Instead of going with what the forefathers had the brains to build, they decided that they needed roads that were narrower, less pavement, more gravel, so that apparently the gravel would be porous for rain and all kinds of
all the junk that goes on the roads. Yes.
In 2016, the city of Fernie commissioned a professional, I believe from Vancouver, at a high cost, to come in and assess every building that the city owned. And the city owned about 42 buildings. Ooh. And this is open to the public. You can go and check out the state of all these buildings. So they told us what each building needed, and the Quonset over at the Public Works was condemned. They said, you cannot use that anymore. So it was sat empty for a year, and that's where the equipment was stored. The arena, they said, was so well built that it could last between 15 to 20 more years. Yes. Nothing was mentioned to us in that report, which you can go and read, about any of the equipment that made it run.
Yes. Yeah, and you notice now, I mean, not just Fernie, but it seems like now Golden has that problem also, and there were other ones, many since it happened here, unfortunately. Now they're checking into it. I mean, the building itself was good, but that wasn't thought of. I shouldn't say thought of. It wasn't part of it.
What people don't understand is that the city of Fernie was working to industry standards, as was every other building that used that kind of equipment.
That kind of equipment, that's
and we had people that were qualified and knew what they were doing. Yeah. It was just a terrible accident.
It was just bad luck, a bad accident. It was just unfortunate. Excuse me, unfortunate. Mm-hmm. For us. But no, it just seems like now with that, if you have an extra dollar, let's spend it. Let's not look to the future. Let's not see what really needs to be done. You know, they're just.
When you're young, I talk about 30s, 40s,
yes, me too,
50s,
yes.
okay? And it was really quite interesting because one lady who must be in her 40s wrote to me and said, "You're out of touch with my demographic, with my," and I laughed and I said to her,
no.
"I have 5 children in various ages,
Yes.
and so don't tell me that I'm out of
I'm out
touch
of
with your
touch.
demographic.
Oh, goodness.
I know
no.
exactly what's going on
That's
in
right.
the world, but it just makes me even more cautious as to how we need to do things."
Yes, like I say, common sense doesn't appeal to them. It's just.
No,
won't
and
go.
they're not
Yes.
afraid
No,
of debt.
That's
they're not
right.
afraid.
They're
That's what I was told.
Now they can use
Yeah.
that card for anything, and they're
Yeah.
not worried about the consequences. And whereas the way we were brought up,
Yeah.
let's try to pay off this, even in your own home. I
Yeah.
don't mean big things. Even in your own home. Okay, we got the truck or our car. Let's see how much we can pay off before we get another huge purchase.
Yeah.
You know, and when you did that, it was okay, like you did. But nowadays, no, it doesn't. It seems like, oh, well, that's okay. And for them, they're the ones that have not been brought up here. They could be, I won't say old timers, they could be here for a few years and they call Fernie home. But something comes up, they'll just leave. And that's what a lot of them are doing. You know, will do too. Because it's not really in their heart and they don't really care one way or the other. Oh, so they'll go somewhere else where it's.
Yeah,
they can
it's
afford
quite
it.
interesting to see the expectations of children, of people today,
Yes.
of our children. I find it really quite interesting that, you know, my generation and yours is considered the baby boomers,
Yes.
and now it's like a boomer, it's like okay boomer, it's like a derogatory remark. But what I get a kick of is that these people in their 40s that are calling me, my age group, okay boomer, as you know, you guys are the ones that have ruined the world. What about your parents? At that age, your parents must be boomers.
That's
or
right.
your grandparents.
You're right. That's right. We're all
You know?
there.
Come on.
They don't see that.
Yeah.
We spoiled it for them.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh gosh. No, that is unfortunate. But no, it's I don't see Fernie changing much unless things change by the people that are running it. And personally, and this is just very personally, every time I read that Fernie has hired another engineer or another person or assistant to the assistant, and my blood pressure goes up because I cannot believe. I know I'm going back, and in the 50s and 60s, City Hall didn't have that many staff, and all of a sudden there's more staff than union people, than the workers, you know, that are out on the streets and whatever. And I cannot grasp that. I cannot see every time there's another, like I say, engineer or whatever, or there was a safety person, that was fine, but every time I hear another one that has been hired, and I thought, and who is that one going to hire for another assistant? And what is he or she hired for?
It's quite
I
interesting because, you know, if I listen to Betty Scanny, who worked
Oh,
for 41
yes.
years at City Hall, she's actually, I think, the longest running employee in
I think so.
in local government in BC.
Oh, I didn't realize
Yeah,
that. I thought it
and
was
so
Fernie.
she talks about how, and back then, the population of Fernie was almost the same
That's
as it is
what
now.
I was going to say. The population's the same,
Yeah.
and we have all these.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
Sorry to interrupt.
she talks about how there was her and Frank Butala and
Yes.
that other man who used to have a house on the corner of,
Oh, how! Oh, I know the one you mean. The big house.
yeah, on the corner of
He
2nd
wa-
Avenue.
Yes.
Anyway,
I
there
think
was
of it.
3 of them,
Yes.
3 or 4 of them, that's it. And she says, you know, come tax time, I would end up having to come home and work weekends, and everything was done by hand,
I
she
know,
said, until
yes.
we got computers, everything was done by hand.
Totally.
And so, you know, yes, I know today there is way more paperwork required by the government.
Yes, that unfortunately,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that brings up the level of workers. I mean, there's so many reports. There's reports, and they require studies. If you want to borrow money,
yeah.
they require studies. They require reports. You know, there's just
And it
way
takes-
more
And it
requirements
takes
than.
forever for them
Yeah.
to answer.
And
yes,
so that's
worse.
why there's more and more people. But certainly in the last few months, there's been.
Yes, there's
way
been
more.
a lot of hiring, which and you don't hear, you just see it one, and then you just see.
Okay.
Yeah, and the only time you hear about it is when they actually put it in the paper. So and so has been hired as another
Yeah.
engineer, and I thought, oh my goodness, not another one. I'd love to see what their duties are.
Well,
That would be something.
I've tried to keep out of. I actually haven't returned to City Hall since I left. The day I left.
Yeah, don't blame
So
you.
I only know the odd thing that I hear, and knowing that being on council, I know that three-quarters or maybe 90% of what you hear isn't correct.
Oh, okay.
But if it is in the free press, for instance, and they're applying, they're asking for applications,
Yes,
then you know that they are hiring.
That's where I
So
get
that
the
you can-
information
yeah,
from,
that's-
because nobody else tells
And that
you
you
anything.
can believe, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's where you see it. So
Yeah.
and so was hired, or whatever, or they're making an application for
Yeah.
something else, and this is what I mean. There's just so much going on that is way too quiet. You just don't hear about it until it's done, sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's true. It's I remember when they did 7th Street, they were going to make it so that nobody could park on the street. And I remember speaking up and saying, there's people living along that street. Where do you expect them
Yes.
to park? And one of the staff people said to me, well, they can go on the avenue. And I said, an older lady or
Oh.
a young mother with
Yes.
children, I said, you expect them to go and park on the avenue?
And
I
bring
said, and what
whatever
if
you
they have a baby?
a
And I said,
baby or
you expect
groceries
them
or-
to bring their groceries in the winter?
And in the winter,
Yeah.
when it's that high.
Oh yeah,
oh.
I always spoke up. I always tried to think, but you know what? I had my time. I did a lot. I'm
And
proud of what I did
That's
for
right.
Fernie.
We are too.
And so,
Yes. But what I see now, they're talking about taking the engineering report and the roads are fine. Now there are more cars than there used to be years ago. Family had one car and that was it. And maybe if they had a driveway, they were too close together. Some of them they couldn't. But now everybody's got one or two or three because that's the way it is. And now they're making the roads small,
Narrow.
smaller, so narrower. And they tell you, well, you cannot park on that side or this side. And that's just, I just cannot understand that.
I know
That's
it.
one thing that really bugs me. That and the buildings they want to do because they want to accommodate all the tourists and see how they, well, I'm sorry, but first look after the people that live in town, that pay all the taxes, people that have bought houses and are paying taxes are not here. Some of them, well, I can't see it. I won't say they're all bad because my neighbor lives in Calgary, but he's here a lot of times. And I can't say enough about him. He is the
I
best.
know,
He
we
looks
have
after.
nothing against our
Oh,
Calgarians.
No, he
Yeah,
looks
they
after
pay
the
taxes.
house and
Yeah.
he looks after mine when I'm not around. It's great. I know, a terrific neighbor Jeff is, but you get some, and I mean, you can see that they're not around and they're just,
Yeah.
don't bother. And
Well,
yet,
the one thing though, Mary, I mean, we've been here all these years because you've been here since
Yes,
50,
since
52. That's how
yes.
many years? That's,
yeah, it's quite a few.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we've seen Fernie go up and
Yes.
down.
Yes.
But we're still here, which means
Yeah.
that we both love love Fernie.
Yes.
And,
It is great.
and if
You
you're
know, when
like
you-
me,
yes.
you'll probably be here until.
Oh, I know,
the
until they
day-
put me under.
Yeah.
But no, it's good. Like it was good because we were down when the mines weren't working, and then when Kaiser took over, it brought it up to par, sort of, and it was quite good. And then, like I said before, when Heiko took over, or did the ski hill, I shouldn't say took over, there wasn't a ski hill when it started.
Yeah.
It just, when it went so public and so
Yeah, it was
company.
when Charlie Locke
And
took over.
when Charlie Locke took over, it was just business.
Well,
It was not for the
the
people
thing
in
is,
town.
we can't stop change.
No,
And
no.
Fernie's been changing. Thankfully, there's some good changes as well
Yes.
as the bad. And I appreciate so much, Mary, that you came and talked about this.
It's
because
good
that's,
to let it out.
yeah, it's
because
just
you-
wonderful.
yes.
You know, because, you know, most people, well, they might not, you think it but not talk about it. But I want to thank you so
thank
much.
You for
No, thank you so much for
thank
coming
you.
and talking
No.
about this, because this is really the history of Fernie that we're
It
talking.
is, and
you
there's
know?
so many things
Yeah.
that happen in between. But,
Yeah.
yes.
We're going to talk for another hour.
Oh, I know.
Thank you for
Totally.
joining us.